Hello and welcome to Daily Faceoff Rundown. This is the Insider Edition, presented by Bet365. Whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Usually we're every Wednesday, and we're recorded in the morning because we got news and info and all that kind of stuff. That's David Pagnotta, by the way. If you see him put his head down and go on his phone, or you see his lips moving but you don't hear anything, it's because he's doing something. He might be breaking a trade. He might be putting his phone, he might be putting everything on mute. But right now, we got him. David, how are you? We'll do it live, baby. Live show for an hour going through the entire league. Carter Hutton will join us. How are you, my friend? What is his screen time currently on your phone?
I don't even want to know. Honestly, I don't even want to know. We were in studio for the big trade deadline day of show tomorrow. Today, doing rehearsals with a bunch of people. But Hutz was there, Jeff Merrick as well. Wojtek Wolski's joining us tomorrow in studio. And half the time during rehearsals, I was just glued to this thing. So I felt kind of bad. But 'tis the season. There's a lot going on. We got a bunch of guys scratched tonight for precautionary reasons across the NHL so far. We'll see who gets scratched later on in the later games. But a lot going on. And you want me to update something quickly, or how do we want to do it?
Yeah, just go nuts.
So Vinny Trocheck and Sam Carrick are both scratched tonight. I think by now everybody knows that for precautionary reasons. I checked in on both fronts. There are multiple options available, and there's been a lot of interest in both, but multiple options available on both Carrick and Trocheck. Nothing at this hour, at the time we're doing this right now, is decided upon yet. So going into the start of the show, nothing decided upon yet on that front, but sounds like multiple options is the direct quote on both players. So we'll see what the Rangers have up their sleeve and what they come up with, but it certainly looks like both Trocheck and Carrick, at the very least, those two will be moved out of Manhattan at some point over the next, I'm going to say 20 hours, because I honestly don't know how much time.
Would you agree with this statement that Vinny Trocheck's probably the biggest fish right now if teams are looking to go and add someone?
It depends how you view Thomas and Kyrou, because I kind of push them in a different category.
Well, they've got so much term left on their deals as well. That's for the future of your team and everything.
Right. So, and 26, 27 years old. So I kind of slot that aside. Yeah, Trocheck to me and Kadri are the top two in the trade market, so to speak, ahead of the deadline. Outside of those guys that we just talked about, Minnesota we know had an offer on the table for Trocheck and continued to have that. Carolina's kicked into the mix, or at least I heard that earlier today, with respect to Trocheck again, former Hurricane themselves. They're obviously familiar with him. And then I know Calgary was talking to Colorado leading up to today about Kadri, and they weren't able to kind of make that work. And then obviously Colorado goes out and brings in Nick Waugh. So if they were to go after Kadri, it'd be a whole other ballgame because the finances don't match up, and they're going to need Calgary to retain. But long-winded answer to say Trocheck and Kadri are probably the top two guys that are available right now.
Okay, let's stick in the Canadian market, and we'll stick with Kadri and the Calgary Flames. Like, they've got a lot of guys that could potentially be on the move in the next little while. Currently, Nazem Kadri, we all know, has a full no-move clause. He would have to be, you would have to approve a deal and obviously the destination of where he wants to go. But also Blake Coleman and Ryan Lomberg could also be on the block as well in these hours leading up to the deadline. What do you make of the situation in its totality in Calgary?
Yeah, I mean, Lomberg's a great candidate to be moved, not just because he's a rental, so to speak. He's on an expiring deal.
Yeah.
The energy that he brings, the experience that he brings, especially come playoff time and cup time, contenders definitely value that. It's not a big ticket. It's not mega dollars. It's something that's palatable. And there are a lot of teams that have interest in Lomberg and Coleman as well. 1 year left on his contract, $4.95 million. Talks have progressed on that front and all three of them, if you include Kadri in that mix. And it wouldn't be shocking to see at least two of those guys moved. I still believe that Coleman is an excellent candidate to be moved by Friday's 3 p.m. deadline. Lomberg as well. And Nas, it kind of depends. There was some chatter that Minnesota poked around on him. I believe they're on his no-trade list.
Okay.
So I don't know if that's changed in the last little bit, but I believe Mini is on Kadri's no trade list. And it hasn't sounded like he's willing to budge off of that list. Maybe because of all the changes Mini has made, and they come to terms on something, maybe he changes his mind, but that's kind of where it is now. I still wonder about the Habs. They can slot him on the wing for the time being if they don't want him at the dot, or interchange him situationally as the game progresses. I believe he's open to going there. I don't think they're on his no trade list. So that plus just a willingness to go there. There are a few teams that are looking at the Habs going, not a bad destination right now, for the possibility of competing now and moving forward. His term factors in here.
We're going to jump around the National Hockey League, so don't blink and don't leave, because you're definitely going to miss something if you do, and what we're going to go on here. Like you mentioned, the Montreal Canadiens. Stick with Western Canada, okay? So follow me here. We're going to go through a roadmap of the whole National Hockey League in a sense. So Edmonton, Stan Bowman comes out today and says, I think we're done. They made a lot of moves. Do you believe them? Do you think the Oilers? Yeah, right? Like that's kind of where I'm at as well. I feel like the Oilers, especially if another Western Conference team here makes a big move, Dallas Stars, I wonder what the Edmonton Oilers, if in fact they go and do so. We'll get to Dallas in a second, but let's just finish up on the Edmonton Oilers. Like I don't think that they're done just yet.
So I know they're looking for depth. And maybe Stan mentioned something about depth, like other than that. So I give him credit on that one. I believe that's accurate. One name that I've heard that they're familiar with, Troy Stecher, in the back end. The Toronto Maple Leafs are engaged in multiple talks involving Stetch, and a little bit of a complicated situation because of the waiver claim and all that. But he's generated interest, and I wouldn't be shocked if Edmonton would be interested in bringing him back because they liked what they had. What they had, that caliber player, I wouldn't be shocked if they go after something like that. I can definitely see them adding a fourth line caliber player as well, affordable piece, and kind of going from there. They got bigger on the back on the bottom six. They got deeper already with Dickinson and with Doc, but it wouldn't shock me if they added a little bit more depth from that regard. But especially on the blue line, or if I could see them doing that. In terms of big,
yeah.
I think it's being saved for the summer.
Yeah.
And there are a couple options I think that are being discussed that I know at least one of them has been discussed this week. Hasn't gotten there yet. So I'm not sure there's enough runway for that to come to fruition ahead of the deadline. I think that's going to be a summer thing. But unless one of these other teams makes a mega splash, whether it's Dallas or somebody else, Utah, sure, we'll get to them. They're very much engaged in trying to do something else on top of the Uyghur acquisition. I could definitely see that being a reactionary type of environment for Edmonton to get involved in, but not a desperately reactionary thing. I think they got a couple irons in the fire that, as I said, they'll really get lit in the summer. Right now, they're just kind of, I don't know, whatever the word is.
Yeah, kind of just waiting and seeing. I mean, look, they're probably going to go on a run. I mean, it's the Edmonton Oilers. You're definitely going to have some sort of playoff success if you do have Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl in your lineup. Hopefully, Jari can turn into the goaltender that they want him to be. We'll see what happens there. Obviously, added Connor Murphy and Jason Dickinson, which will help up front. All right, the Vancouver Canucks are everyone's favorite. What is going on there? Team right now in the National Hockey League. There's a lot of irons in the fire, or at least people think there is. From my point of view, and from what I know and understand, there is a lot of interest in Connor Garland. I think that is a player that they are trying to move. I think that is a player that they're trying to move, that he's a guy that, can be serviceable for a lot of other teams. I do think that the Canucks are going to have to take some money in if they do make that move. I think that they view him potentially a first-round pick would be the return for a guy like Connor Garland. I'm not entirely sure how many teams are willing to give up on that, especially if you're taking a guy for a 6-year deal. But what other names around the Vancouver Canucks are you hearing and the latest there?
Well, just before I get to just on Garland's front, I think there are about 6 or 7 teams in the mix on Connor Garland. Excuse me. I know we've talked about this before. I know Boston and the Islanders have checked in. I don't think it ends up in that direction, but I know they've been part of the mix this week. I believe the San Jose Sharks have had discussions on that front. I think the New Jersey Devils have as well. And there are a few others. So there's a considerable amount of discussion around Connor Garland. And yeah, I think a first round pick plus is the preferred package, but it may end up being a prospect, a second round pick, and maybe an additional asset that goes back, depending on how that works. And to your point, depending on what kind of money goes back. It's not going to be retention, but it's going to be you got to take some kind of contract in some fashion. What's that? The Islanders, the Bruins, the Sharks, and the Devils. Four teams. I think there's 6 or 7 in that mix overall, at least this week, leading up to tomorrow's deadline, that have had some pretty in-depth conversations, or at least significant interest in Garland. Outside of that, Teddy Bluger, a lot of options and interest there. I know all of Vancouver freaked the hell out a little earlier when I tweeted that if they don't trade him, if they don't trade him, they don't get their price. And I honestly don't know what the actual price is, but whatever their price is, they don't get it. They will have conversations about signing him to an extension. So
don't yell at me for tweeting what this guy said. It's out there. But here's the thing that people need to realize. It's definitely a thing. The guy's 31 years old, going to be 32 next year. They like him. They don't know that the question of their center ice depth right now with Elias Pettersson, Philip Hedl, who's on IR. You don't know what type of player Marco Rossi is going to be. They want someone there. They want a good veteran in the room. And he's probably going to come at cheap. He's been on the record saying that he loves it here, wants to stay in Vancouver, but these are how these things go. And the ask, again, we don't know what the ask is. If the ask is high for players on the Vancouver Canucks roster, a lot of teams aren't going to be willing to pay it.
No, exactly. And it's not just for I don't know what the price tag is on Bluger specifically, but they've set their bar and they're hoping to hit it. Jake DeBrusk is also very much out there. And we talked about this last week on the show that you brought this up, Irf, that he would welcome a trade. And then on Monday, he tells the media, I didn't ask for a trade, but I don't want to be part of this rebuild. I'm not built for this. Get me out of here.
And you walked it back. And then you walked it back a little bit.
Yeah, well, because he realized, maybe gave a little bit too much away, but he is open to being moved. So they're having those types of discussions. Drew O'Connor has generated a lot of interest. They're having those discussions as well. Elias Pettersson, it's hard to gauge. You would probably know a little bit more than probably a lot more than I would on that front. You're fully tapped in there, but some people tell me that he's being discussed, and others say it's probably not going to happen. So it depends where you're at on that, but DeBrusk, absolutely. O'Connor, absolutely. Bluger, definitely. And Garland, they're aggressively trying to make that happen. Evander Kane, he's like plan D for a lot of teams. So that if Kane gets traded, it's at half his money, and it's likely at like the 11th hour before the deadline.
And a late round pick, probably. Like, teams aren't going to panic and give up really much for this player. There hasn't been much interest around him. Quickly on Elias Pettersson, very little. I think if anything is going to happen there, it's probably going to be a summertime thing. You just open up the book to everyone else in the National Hockey League at that point. When you're talking about a player like that, obviously the 11.6 cap hit for the next 7 years. There's a lot to go and a lot surrounding that player, who's also now becoming a very polarizing figure in the National Hockey League. All right, let's get to Carter Hutton, who is here and can join us. And Hutz is also part of the Daily Faceoff family. He'll be on the big show with you, Dave, tomorrow on a panel with Wojciech Wolski. Yeah. And what's going on, Hutz? Let me ask you this. Trade deadline in the air. How nervous, and you being in rooms during this situation, how nervous is the time leading up to in and around the deadline?
You know what? I guess it depends where your season is at and where you're going, right? Like, for me, I didn't feel a ton of pressure at times, because at times I was just like a disposable backup, and there wasn't like a ton of value early in my career. So I guess in those times in Nashville, I was just making sure Pekka had a nice warm cup of coffee between periods, so the deadline didn't stress me out. But then when I went on the 1 year in St. Louis, and I have a fond memory of being in Minnesota, and we're at the St. Paul Hotel, which is where everyone kind of stays. It's an older spot. We had the day off, and it was trade deadline day. And I remember sitting in the bar with the guys and we're having lunch and we're hanging out, and Paul Stastny got traded that day. And I remember the absolute gut punch that our team felt. And it wasn't necessarily like, it was just the message we got from our general manager that we were going the other way. He moved on to the Winnipeg Jets. They were making a push, and we were a bubble team at that point too. And I think that's something you will find. Something we heard last year, Dylan Larkin come out and like talk about how Stevie Y didn't go out and get anybody, and where it left the team and that confidence wise. So I think that is where you feel it the most. And it's a tricky time. And I think at times people forget that, we're humans and we have families, and there's so much more that goes into it than just a contract or a person being moved out.
Well, that's what I was kind of going to get into a little bit. And before I ask you who or what do you think needs to happen, or biggest move, this, that, and the other, let's kind of get into the Colton Parayko situation a little bit, right? There's a lot of talk being made about him expressing his right in his contract to, use his no trade clause and not move. As a player, obviously it's being negotiated and agreed upon by the team and the agent and yourself to have that in your contract. So for him to not go and do it immediately, what was your first reaction there?
Well, you know what? I'm not a big tweeter. I'm a little less like Dave, and that's just not my thing. I'm not a social media guy. And I took to it today to say like no movement clause, but then like you add this pressure to the element, and I feel like it's a bit of a slimy move in the sense of like, what goes on, and I don't know who put it out there, whether it's St. Louis or it's Buffalo or how it gets leaked, but from a player standpoint, it's like you earn the right to get that no movement clause. And yes, I know everybody complains about everyone has a no movement clause nowadays. Well, that's not the player's fault. That's something that needs to be negotiated by the CBA, and I get this tactic that you put it out there to try to pressure him into it. But I think for Colton Parayko, he's earned the right to do what he wants to do, right? This is a very good hockey player, and you're at a point where, right now there might be a little bit of wildfire, and he might get booed the next time he plays against the Sabres in Buffalo. I could probably promise you that, being able to play for both those franchises. But for Colton, he decides his fate. It's the same thing with arbitration and the process that goes into it. There are rules put in place to protect the players. Just like there's nobody on the other side complaining against, the general manager that gave him that no movement clause, and now they try to revoke it. So for Colton, he has the power, and he took advantage of it today.
All right, one more thing I want to get to you before Dave can ask you a question. Dave's busy, so this is good. This is you and I kind of, and
this is I saw him all day today.
This is a preview of tomorrow. We've got the Insider Cam tomorrow. I'm not going to spoil too much of it, but we've got the Insider Cam tomorrow. So you're going to look at Dave, the top of his head, for a lot of the day. Okay, here we go. Oh wait, I see you giving me the finger there.
Yeah, just you guys can talk about this. Nothing is done yet, but there is significant traction with respect to Connor Garland, and. Very good chance that he is moved. Now what's being categorized. There are 3 teams currently in the mix. I mentioned a couple of them earlier. I thought the Islanders and the Bruins were out of it. They're not. It's down to those 2 and the New Jersey Devils by the sounds of things, barring something getting completely shifted in a different direction. The Devils, the Bruins, and the Islanders all right now very much in a race for Connor Garland. The expectation is Garland will be traded by the deadline. Again, expectation versus guarantee. I'm not giving a guarantee because I'm not the one in the trade talks, but that's the update as of this second. Talk amongst yourselves. I'm going to get back to this.
Okay, so Hutch, Connor Garland obviously plays here in Vancouver. He's a guy that's a career 50-point guy, and his high speed 56 was his high in career points. Not the biggest guy, but a guy that wears his heart on his sleeve and plays his ass off basically every single game. When you look at it from a fit perspective, the Boston Bruins, he's from Massachusetts, going back home to him would be incredible, but what do you like about Connor Garland's game, and how much could he help a team, especially now entering or about to be in the first year of a 6-year extension too?
If we're going to be totally transparent here, I hated playing against Connor Garland. I hated playing against him. He's one of those guys that is dangerous at any time in the offensive zone. He's so creative, and you never really know what he's going to do. Where, you think about certain players, like there's some predictability to their game, right? And he was a player that he was always, even see it, like he did the kung fu kick this year on a stick on a puck protection play. And like, that's just kind of the creativity that he uses, but he also has that grit in his game. And I think he can play that kind of rat game, and he can get down in the mud, and he can do that, which adds some value, right? He has term on his contract, so which will be interesting. The Bruins are an interesting one for me because like they've had this outlier season where, they're in a playoff spot right now. I don't think anyone expected them to be there. They've had some good pieces that have stepped up and played well. Morgan Geeky's story's been awesome. Jeremy Swayman's getting back to form, what we've expected. The Islanders is one for me. Like, is he a piece that you can add and help this team get better right away? Because I do love the point with the Islanders. is you have Matthew Schaefer right now for cheap money, right?
Yep.
Like he is a guy that is going to get an absolute payday very, very soon once that entry-level contract's done. So do you start to add some pieces early because you still have Bo Horvat, you still have Matthew Barzal? Can you get in there and make some noise? And then, Ilya Sorokin, how good he can be. So for Connor Garland, it's a good move. And I think for the Vancouver Canucks, if you can start pulling back some assets and get this team back into a little bit more of an honest rebuild from what's gone on there, the fall from, what'd they send? 5 players to the All-Star game the other year. And This is where they're at now. So it's been a tough turnaround for the Vancouver Canucks.
Yeah, I mean, the most important day in franchise history is the draft lottery. That will be coming up for them. And, obviously, you hope you take your rabbit's feet or whatever you need to do to that if you're Patrick Allvin and the rest of the group there. All right, when you look at trade deadlines and things like that, and who is going to improve the most? And I look at the Central Division. I look at the Colorado Avalanche, I look at the Dallas Stars, and I look at the Minnesota Wild. Those 3 teams, it is going to be a war to get through and try and make it to the conference final in the Western Conference. So when you look at it from an aspect of, okay, Colorado just added, they got Nicholas Waugh. The Minnesota Wild interests me. Billy Guerin, we've obviously seen it, isn't afraid to make a deal. So what do you make of that division? And obviously hearing now that the Dallas Stars could be in on something big as well leading up to the deadline.
When you think of the Minnesota Wild, like you're in for a penny, you're in for a pound at this point, right? You go out and you get Quinn Hughes, you make that move. Like at this point, like I feel like anything is on the table for the Minnesota Wild. And again, I think the overshadowing Central Division is, it's obviously daunting, right? To think that if you're the Minnesota Wild or Dallas Stars, you're going to have a terrible first round matchup. And then you're going to probably meet the Colorado Avalanche. Then you're going to have to meet, the Vegas Golden Knights or Edmonton Oilers, whoever sorts their shit out in the Pacific, because it's been such a mess. But that is the fact, I think, at Billy Guerin and the demands of what Minnesota needs, right? This is a place that breeds hockey. It's the state of hockey, and they haven't got past the first round. Like they have had a lack of playoff success. And we had played against them in St. Louis the one year when Devin Dubnyk, they were rolling. They had an unbelievable team. And we ended up beating them in the first round because of great performance by Jake Allen. So I feel like that is a bit of a black cloud over Bill Guerin, over the Minnesota Wild. So for them to add a few pieces, even Jeff Petrie, that's a good add. Like he's a good player. He can eat up minutes. He skates. He plays well in his own end. And with the 2 goalie punch, I think they're going to be in every single hockey game. If Gustin's not going, you have Wallstedt ready to rock.
David?
Oh, I turned the mic on.
Muted us. There you go. Something was going on.
That's it. We were annoying him.
Still trying to figure out the Garland thing. It's still early, but it has definitely progressed on those discussions. So I want to ask you about going back to goaltending a little bit, and the Montreal Canadiens. They got a few irons in the fire. They're looking at a defenseman. They're back and forth on Thomas and Kyrou and things of that nature. Kadri, like we talked about a little bit beforehand, before you jumped on. Sergei Bobrovsky, there's some people who told me today that Bobrovsky has been asking some people what life is like living in Montreal. I don't know how they finagle this with the cap, and I would imagine that Patrick Laine would have to be moved out in some capacity. So that aside, they'll figure out the finances. They're a lot smarter than I am. But Bob in Montreal, what would you say about that if that actually comes to fruition in the next 20 hours?
I wouldn't be surprised. I've kind of been on Bob today a little bit. The fact is, he's got 1 year, right? It's going to be up. He's a UFA. So you could cut a deal, be like, hey, you're royalty here down in Florida, right? Like this is the guy that he was the first goalie that you can't pay $10 million. It's going to ruin your team forever. And then they start winning. It goes, well, you have to pay your goalie $10 million. Like it changed the whole landscape of how we projected contracts for goaltenders. But I think for Bob, like imagine you make the deal, like, hey, go there, have a run, help out. And I think if you're Montreal and you can make the numbers work, bringing in a player like Sergei Bobrovsky just to be around your younger goalies, to be around Montembeault, to be around, obviously someone moves out, Dobish and Fowler, to see how he takes care of business. Because there's one thing that I will say about Sergei Bobrovsky, having a chance to play against him for so many years, is there's not many other goalies like him that know how to prepare away from the rink, on the rink. And I think there's value in the confidence it would bring to a Montreal Canadiens team who is a little fragile in the sense of like they have a lot of weight on their shoulders now that expectations have grown a lot too. And I don't think it would hurt your future because of the fact he's a UFA. So it would be exciting. The other one that I pinned today would be the San Jose Sharks, but it makes more sense if he went somewhere as a contender. And I guess if you're Florida, I don't know, maybe he wants a little bit of a break too. It's been a lot of years of going to the Cup final every year.
And that's the interesting thing too, because just to add to this, I was told yesterday that he is looking for a 5 or 6 year extension with Florida. I have no idea what the dollars are. He's going to be 38 at the start of next season.
He's 38. Yeah, exactly.
He turns 38 in September. And apparently he's asking for a lengthy contract. I was told 5 or 6 years, which is, I mean, if it's $2 million, then maybe it's a different story. But even that, just age alone, is.
I mean, Hutz,
really
you played Hutz, you played the position. Can you do it into your mid to late 40s?
Oh, I was a bit more of a milk bag than Sergei Bobrovsky. I made it to 35 and 36. Like, once I hit 28, 29, I needed a good night's sleep consistently. There was no burning it at both. The playing guilty thing started to get old real quick with me. But I think for Bobrovsky, I guess, you've been held to such a high standard in so long. And is this just an outlier year, right? Because he has underperformed, right? He hasn't been good. But that being said, the whole Florida Panthers team hasn't been good. But this is without Alexander Barkov. Right, this is without the key piece.
Yeah.
And you're sitting there and you just watch Brad Marchand take that big ticket at his age. And maybe Bobrovsky, you're like, well, I still think there's value for me. And that's what I want to get. I will find it unearthing for him to move on from Florida. The fact he's made over $100 million in his career as well. Like, he has earned a lot of money to uproot the situation he's in to go somewhere. It's different if it was short term, right, Dave? If he was like, hey, we're going to move you out and then you come back and sign. I just think that number is a very, very tall ask for a team that is already committed to a lot of players long-term on a goalie that's, his better days are behind him.
Also, to me, it's kind of interesting. Go ahead, Dave.
Sorry, or just what's most interesting, to me, is before this week, I was pretty convinced they'd eventually figure out like a 2, maybe 3 year extension. He loves it there. He had a home there before he got to Florida, an off-season home, and that would be his spot. But with the chatter today that I had heard that he's at least talking to people about what Montreal is like, it's not like he has to chase cups. He just won 2 of them. So that just shows to me the fire that's in his belly is still very, very, very bright and potent. And maybe it makes sense to get him on a longer-term deal. I'm not saying it's going to happen with the Habs. And I don't even know if that trade will even happen. But just this little sequence of events here with Bob over the last little bit's been pretty intriguing.
And I think too, I would say too about Montreal or quick was like, it's so cultured too, right? And I think it does have sex appeal to a Russian, to a European player, to a guy that because it is, right?
Definitely.
Like, it's a package deal at this point, right? If you're Sergei Bobrovsky, him and his wife, this is the decision you're making together. It's different if you're a young buck and you're just trying to cut your teeth. This is Sergei Bobrovsky. I'm telling you, he's not coming home to his wife being like, we're not having a say in the matter at this point.
Right.
Yeah.
And let's be honest, Montreal in May and June, a little bit better than February and March.
Well, I think the other thing that was interesting is just how many goalie names that we've heard in this cycle of trade deadline talk, right? I mean, Dave talked about it last week, a couple of weeks ago. Jordan Binnington's name was kind of being thrown out. The Minnesota Wild, are they going to dangle one of their goaltenders to try and acquire maybe something else or to go and bring in a attacking player or things like that? So when you hear about so many goalies being involved, Carter, what's your first reaction to that?
I think it's a little buyer beware too. You look at some of the big trades that have gone down for goalies, and the one that just sticks out thoroughly in my mind is the fact of Ryan Miller, right? Like, Ryan Miller was the piece St. Louis needed to push them over the top. They had the full spectrum of player. They had it all. Then Ryan Miller goes from a system where they're giving up a lot of chances. He's a busy goalie. And then all of a sudden you go to a different system and expectations change too. So that would be like my concern of, if you're plucking a goalie out of a situation where maybe the expectations and everything's lower, there's not as much pressure, and then you get thrown in the system. And I do think goalies can translate easier because stopping pucks is stopping pucks, but there is a predictability that you have to learn in the defensive zone and managing the defenseman and communication, everything that goes on. But the expectations go through the roof, and every single night, every game matters, because whatever team you're getting moved to and coming to, if you're a contender, there's a lot more pressure on you. So I think that is a quick dynamic to try to get your headspace around during the NHL season, especially with not much time to go.
All right, Hutz, before I let you go and we get back to Dave being on his phone and me just talking, let me ask you, Biggest name traded. Who do you think is going to, or let's just say, what team do you think is going to make the biggest move? Forget about name. What team do you think is going to come out of nowhere and make the biggest move?
Ooh, what name makes the biggest move? So,
what team?
This is a really, because we've seen some good trades today. I think Carolina. I think Carolina is going to do something to really move the needle, just because of the expectations there and the lack of success past the Eastern Conference final, right? And is there a conference, like the Eastern Conference is wide open? Like if you're sitting here being like Tampa Bay, Carolina, it feels like Carolina's got the easiest path they've ever had to the conference final. Like, why wouldn't you go? And they tried to do it with Rantanen last year. It didn't work out. They made some moves. I think they tried again this year.
Carter, you're the best. Enjoy. Your boots on the ground, all right? So
that's it. I'm in the hotel room. That's it.
All right. Well, enjoy the evening, and we look forward to it tomorrow. Carter Hutton will be on a panel on our show on the Daily Faceoff trade deadline special, so make sure you tune into that, Carter. Appreciate it. Get a good night's sleep, bud.
Get some rest, buddy.
That's Carter Hutton, who will be a part of panel with Tyler, obviously Johnny Lazarus. I'll be around as well. There are lots of people, lots of different characters involved in tomorrow's show. Lots of interesting stuff from him. He's got a really good take on different situations in the league, and the goaltender thing, and the sex appeal that is Montreal with Sergei Bobrovsky and his family, and maybe he really does want to go to the Montreal Canadiens if that's an option for him. But goaltending is going to be really interesting as we kind of use my two favorite words, Dave, circle back to getting this thing back on the rails here when talking about teams. And you mentioned the Montreal Canadiens, and a player that we talked about a lot, hasn't played a lot this season, is Patrik Laine. Can you see any sort of movement in the next hours that lead up to the deadline on this player?
Well, tonight, unless something is picked up at this hour, I was told on the Laine front anyway that it's relatively quiet as teams are looking at alternative options and what else is out there. And from the Canadian side, like if they're going to make a bigger type move, they got to free up a little bit of cash. So what's going on? Like I've got to imagine they're going to want to look to find what's going on in the market for Laine. But coming into this hour, I was told it's somewhat quiet on that front. That being said, there's still the expectation that he's going to be moved tomorrow. And talking to two people close to that situation, they both felt that tomorrow they're categorizing league-wide as a frenzy, which is going to be great for our show. So we'll see if it gets to that point. But on Laine specifically, things cooled down a little bit. Los Angeles circled back. They obviously feel, okay, let's be realistic about where we're at. Now, it doesn't mean they might not bring in Laine still for a little bit of an audition. Bring him in at half the pop at $4.35 million. See if he can gel with any of their guys, if he can build some chemistry. It gives them an opportunity to say, okay, you know what? We know what this player can do with our guys. Let's get a contract that makes sense and keep him around. And that might not necessarily be only exclusive to the Kings. Other teams may look to see, if this might be an option for them, moving forward. And instead of dipping your toe into the free agent waters in July, you can get that out of the way now. So Laine is an interesting one. I think it'll pick up tonight going into tomorrow, and then kind of going from there.
The Toronto Maple Leafs. 3 players out of the lineup once again. Bobby McMann, Scott Laughton, Oliver Ekman-Larsson not in the lineup, but seemingly Brad Treliving is listening to absolutely everyone, or on everyone and everything, unless your name is probably William Nylander, unless your name is probably Austin Matthews, Matthew Nyes, maybe not. We'll see. But the Toronto Maple Leafs are going to be very interesting because you don't hold out players and nothing happens. So what can we expect? And let's start with Bobby McMann.
Yeah, so those conversations, there's multiple options. I'm going to say that with a lot of guys because the Leafs are fishing around. So I'm not trying to give you a cop-out answer, but this is just what's been feeding.
Well, it's true. I mean, we're hours before the deadline. This is exactly what's going on. These teams are going to have options. They're going to listen to them. I don't think we're going to see a deadline as busy as this one might be with respect to everything that's going on.
Because there's so many guys. There are so many freaking guys that are available. So Bobby McMann, they went back and forth a little bit, even leading into today on a contract. Doesn't look like it's going to get there unless there's a major give or take or whatever the hell you want to describe it from one of the sides. It doesn't look like it's getting there. I was told the 5 times 5 neighborhood, so basically $25 million was what they were looking for. I was also told that's what Scott Laughton's side was kind of looking for as well, around that. And the Leafs don't have an appetite there on either side. I expect Laughton to be moved here in the next day and a bit. And by all accounts, it looks like McMahon as well. Now, they've been trying to push for a first-round pick for McMahon. I don't know if it's going to get there. I don't get that sense. Could they package him up with another piece, with a Stetcher, with a Laughton, with Lorentz, with Simon Benoit? Benny's available too. They're talking to teams about him. He's got another year on his contract. So the Leafs are kind of exploring different options and avenues here, rather than just moving out. Like today was Nick Waugh, the only guy. Can they combo a couple of these pieces and maximize those returns? And they have their 3 retention slots available. I think there's an appetite to eat that on the expiring deals, especially because those come off the books come July, in terms of the cap implications. And you can max a return in that sense. I believe Tampa has interest in Scott Laughton, and he's only $1.5 million.
Yeah.
And you get him at half, like $775K. That's right up what the Bolts like to do. I also heard that the Bolts have also checked in on OEL too, and so's Boston, so's Detroit. Utah did before the Uyghur thing. I think the Canadians checked in. I think a few other teams have kind of poked around there. I think Buffalo has circled or was circling at one point. Could you see a scenario where it's a Laughton at half the price and an OEL at 3.5 going to Tampa? They can make the money work, bring back some type of body. And they've got Sam O'Reilly available. The kid they got from Edmonton for Isaac Howard. He's been a fish that they've been dangling. And there's another player, and I always forget his name, and I will figure it out at some point. There's another prospect that the Bolts are willing to listen on and have discussions on. Kick myself in the ass because I always forget, but it'll come to me at some point, or I'm going to just look after I stop talking. But the Bolts have a couple young pieces that they're willing to move to fill some needs. And one of the things that Brisebois has said repeatedly, and he told me this at the Stadium Series, if they're bringing an impact type player, it's somebody who's here beyond this season. And he was pretty adamant about that, especially if they have to pay a decent price, including one of their top prospects. OEL's got 2 more years on his contract. That might be a direction that would fit for them and Scott Laughton. But we'll see kind of where that goes. There's a lot of interest in those guys. I mentioned Troy Stetcher. I believe there's a few options on the table with him. His situation is a little complicated. Then we get to the bigger pieces. And Morgan Riley and Matthew Nyes. Now, all week I've been hearing Matthew Nyes, and people were telling me I'm crazy. People are telling me probably not happening. I've got denials from the Maple Leafs organization. But people around the league are saying that they've had discussions, or there are discussions involving Matthew Nyes. Now, if this were to happen, we're talking mega blockbuster. First year of a 7-year extension. We're talking mega block, I think. I don't even know if his new contract kicked in yet, to be perfectly honest, off the top of my head. But either way, it would take one hell of a trade for them to even consider doing that. But his name legitimately has been out there, at least according to the 4 or 5 teams that I've talked to that have brought his name up. The other guy is Morgan Riley, and
does Morgan want to move? I think.
Well, I don't know.
I think there's two. I think there's 2 ways of looking at this. Does Morgan Riley want to leave Toronto? Probably not. But does Toronto want Morgan Riley to leave? And that's probably a yes.
I think it's more the latter. Yeah.
Yeah.
And this might be a little too early now ahead of tomorrow's deadline. This might be something that is going to be more, whatever. More. The words are hard now because you're barely sleeping. Wait till tomorrow. It's going to be amplified in the summer.
Into our show, please.
Substitute word. Yeah, I know. I get some sleep. But my gut says it gets picked up in the summer. I think they're going to have that conversation again with him. They had a brief conversation last off season. Anyway, Morgan Riley, I wouldn't be shocked if his name pops up. I know there was discussion with San Jose a number of years ago before the new regimes came in. I think while Dubas was around, while Doug Wilson was still around in San Jose. But I've heard that might be an option now. And we know they're looking for defensemen. We know they're looking for guys with term in terms of vets to be part of that blue line. They're also looking for young guys in San Jose to shore up that blue line. And Anaheim's another one that is circling around. They're looking for another top six forward. But I wonder about Morgan Riley and that possibility. Ryan Strom's name has been out there for a good chunk of the season. It's not that they need the money to go, but they need the bodies to go at some point, and eventually they're going to be up against the cap, or at least be tighter against the cap, because they've got to give Carlson and Gauthier and Zellweger some money on new deals. So if they make a big move for a defenseman, I wouldn't be shocked if Ryan Strome is part of a deal. And I'm just curious about Toronto. They need 2 top 6 wingers. You put him at center. You move Tavares to the left. Maybe he's the third line guy that comes in as a 3C to replace Waugh. He's got another year on his contract. I'm just spitballing here. I'm just talking. I know he's available, and they're looking for D. So, and I think Morgan might be more inclined to go west. But I am just, if it does get serious, I wouldn't be shocked if the Ducks and the Sharks enter that mix.
Year 1 of Nye's contract, by the way.
It is year 1. Okay.
Yeah, and we're so on the same page because we've been doing this show so much that you mentioned the Anaheim Ducks, and they signed Ryan Poehling to a 4-year deal worth $3.75 AAV a year. So it's Ryan Poehling signing a new contract extension in Anaheim, 4-year deal worth $3.75 a year. Good contract for him. Obviously, wants to stay down in Anaheim, and figuring out what the Anaheim Ducks are going to do is interesting because they have such good talent. Leo Carlsson is on the verge of being a superstar in the National Hockey League, and it's going to be interesting what Pat Verbeek decides to do here with the Anaheim Ducks and his organization to try and, get them to the playoffs and get them to obviously compete for a Stanley Cup in years to come. Dave, all right, let's keep going and circling around the National Hockey League when it comes to who is doing what and where. The Ottawa Senators traded for Warren Foegele from the Los Angeles Kings, so that's a little move for the Ottawa Senators. Didn't think that they were going to do anything big. Didn't think Steve Staios really wanted to do anything massive from that. And also, we're just getting word, you put this out earlier, right? AJ Greer out for roster management reasons, yes, and Bobrovsky is the backup.
Yeah, which is effectively him being scratched for roster purposes. Logan Stanley, Luke Shen also not playing tonight. They're being scratched for the same reason.
Sell mode is hitting hard around the National Hockey League. Okay, I want to get to the Utah Mammoth because I love what they're doing over there. And that defense core is going to be good for the next decade with them now getting Mackenzie Weegar. But I don't even think they're close to being done yet. I really don't. I think that Ryan and Ashley Smith, the ownership group, is all in. I think that Bill Armstrong, we had him on this show, says that we want to improve. We know where we are and the young talent that we have and what we can do. And with the way things are so open right now in the Western Conference, and you add a little bit more, effectively you're going up against Colorado, Edmonton, Vegas, but Utah thinks they can compete. So I think they're going to be a team that will add by the time the deadline hits tomorrow.
Yeah, and they sorry, just trying to piece this all together as we're doing this live. It's fun. I think they circled back today. I believe strongly that they did. They circled back today on Robert Thomas.
Yep.
The Blues want Caleb Desnoyers as part of a return. He's the 4th overall pick last year. They want a 1st round pick and another first-esque type of asset. I don't think they've offered, I think the offer has been Desnoyers and a 1st round pick. And obviously the Blues are asking for more. But I think the Mammoth are comfortable with that package. Now, let's see how talks went today. Maybe this falls apart and it doesn't happen. But I agree with you. I don't think they're done. I think they really like Robert Thomas. I feel like they're willing to do at least one of their top 5 guys. I was told that they're not moving Iginla. They're not moving Simashev. A little bit surprised if Beaudoin is also available in that regard. I mean, I was kind of surprised that Desnoyers was available, or not necessarily available, but a willingness for them to actually explore that. But that's what it sounds like. If they're going to make a move with Thomas, that he might be a centerpiece in that regard. But I fully agree with you. I thought they definitely wanted to hit the D market. Remember, on the blue line, going into the summer, going towards July 1, they were going to go hard after Aaron Ekblad, and that didn't happen because he re-upped with Florida. But all their intentions were to go after Ekblad if he hit the open market, and it didn't. They were going to go hard after um, Sam Bennett, excuse me.
Yep.
And same situation. He re-upped in Florida, so they don't like Florida very much. But both areas of the ice, that's what the Utah Mammoth wanted to address. They do that with Uyghur, and I think that was a very good move for them. Now, Calgary, I think they like Castagna. They really like. They like the player out of Cornell. They like what he's capable of. And then getting 3 second-round picks gives them 4 total. You move those 4, you get 2 late first-round picks. That's kind of how they potentially view that. And I think they will explore that possibility at the draft or leading up to it. But Utah they make their hit with their defensemen, and now they're trying to figure out their top 6. And I don't think it's necessarily exclusive to center, but we'll see kind of how that evolves. They'd love to get their hands on Thomas. The other team, we haven't heard much on Thomas, and maybe it's because they don't have what St. Louis wants. But we know Seattle wants to take a big swing. They've tried before. They tried on Kyrou at the draft last year. They tried to get Panarin before he was dealt to LA. They want to make a big move and bring in a big guy. And Shane Wright would be the centerpiece of a package, including whatever else it takes. I got to imagine that a first-round pick, Shane Wright, and one of their top prospects might be intriguing for St. Louis. Might have to be a little bit different in terms of overall package, but I'm just curious about Seattle in that front. And let's keep in mind, Thomas has a full no trade, so he can dictate where he goes. And how we've seen other things happen in St. Louis, they may want to get a pretty good idea so that they don't waste their time.
You and I have talked about this a lot over the last few weeks, and I've always said, I don't know. I don't think so. It would surprise me very much so that he would even agree if there was a deal to be made there. But you mentioned big, and you mentioned they want to do something and kind of start fresh with someone. You look at Robert Thomas. He's got a very long contract. You look at a guy like Jordan Kyrou. He's got a long contract. Elias Pettersson. I mean, I don't think it's something that'll happen here in the next 48 hours, but if you wanted to go there, I bet you that the Seattle Kraken would love to hear what that would take for them to acquire this player from the Vancouver Canucks. I think that one would be interesting. I think that it's a place that maybe Elias Pettersson can thrive in that market. Again, player would have to go there. There's a lot that'd be consideration. You're trading within your division. I-5 rival. They're only 2 hours down the road. Actually, not rival because it never met in a playoff series. It doesn't count. You're not a rival until you do that. But it again would be very interesting to see 2 general managers in teams that we've heard nothing about yet. The Carolina Hurricanes and the Detroit Red Wings.
We'll hear something soon.
No, and the Detroit Red Wings.
Hear on both of those guys.
Yeah, but then that's the thing. It's just been very quiet around them. Reminds me of Vegas in years past, where you don't hear anything, and then bam, in comes Mark Stone.
Thomas Hertl.
Bam, in comes Thomas Hertl. Right, like that. So you look at these 2 teams now. Stevie Yzerman, you don't hear anything coming out of that building, and Eric Tulsky in Carolina, that guy wants to make a move or 2, because that team, just watched them play the other night against the Vancouver Canucks. Yeah, the Canucks played a great game, but I don't think the Carolina Hurricanes were trying very much in that hockey game. They're a good team with Stanley Cup aspirations. So, again, another 2 teams. Game? The Canucks played a great game. From their standards, they played a great game.
Okay. Fair enough.
The bar's not high here in Vancouver, buddy.
Yeah.
You've been watching.
I get it.
You've been watching the Leafs all season.
Oh, my God, it's horrible. It's just been bad. It's been bad. I
was going to ask you a question, but I'm just going to let you speak
yes, you
on
were.
them.
Sorry.
No, it's okay. Fine. Go
ahead.
No, we're good.
No. Let's go. Let's go. You got
Which
this.
one of the 2 teams do you think makes a bigger splash?
Oh, man. I want to say Detroit because I think they're legitimately trying.
Yeah.
To to do something big. Like I think Carolina's willing to do something big, but as we talked about at the start of the show, they circled back on Trocheck, and I think there's there's been some traction there. And if that's their big move, I think they're good with that. I still want to see them address goaltending. I think Bennington would be somebody that I would pursue. Maybe they have. I don't know. But anyway, I think they'd be comfortable with, okay, we got Trocheck back, and we're good to move forward here come playoff time. Because I think the East is fairly open. Detroit has been, look, they tried on Anderson. They tried on Myers. They tried on Quinn. No. They've tried a bunch. Like they a lot of teams do this. You throw your irons in the fire. You have those conversations. You're not going to win on everybody. Sometimes you strike out 10 times in a row. Then you finally get your guy. But last season, the captain was pretty pissed off that they didn't make a move. And Stevie Yzerman, I think rightfully, said, we're not ready. I think they're ready this year to make some type of addition. And whether it's on the back end, I mean, I think Parayko would look amazing on that decor, but all indications are, and Weeksy kind of put this out as well, that he if he's going to wave, it's going to be somewhere west. So maybe that's not going to be a fit. But
number 55, that just hurts people in Detroit. They'd have a lot of memories of a guy that used to live on that blue line and do that.
That's right. Yeah, Nick Ronwall. Look at you. Nice. Anyway, if they can bring in that piece, I think they'd like to, which is why they've kind of circled on Ristolainen, and they've gone back and forth with Ristolainen for a little while. Right after camps resumed, Detroit, a number of teams actually, right after camps resumed, reached out to Philadelphia about Ristolainen. Boston did, Tampa did, the Canadiens did, a few other teams. Anyway, Detroit certainly wants to bring in somebody on that blue line, and they've been part of the Thomas equation, or discussion anyway. That leads me to believe that they really want to make some type of big splash here. Maybe they don't pull it off because maybe they can't. But if I'm picking one of the two, I think that Detroit would make a bigger, or wants to at least make a bigger splash. And I think Carolina's content with making an educational addition, a smart type of ad. And I think Trocheck would fit nicely back there.
Yeah, I would have to agree with you on Trocheck. I think they're trying very hard. All right, I got one for you. We've said all year that this player was going to be treated as if he had a no movement clause. You know where I'm going with this?
Nashville?
Ryan O'Reilly is not playing tonight for the Nashville Predators. Immediately, what does that signal to you?
Well, can he? I mean this in jest, but he can see, right? Like, because he got that stick right by the eye. So I wonder if
he was wearing a visor. He was wearing a visor, and remember he was trying out a visor. There was a shot of it. I think someone took a picture of it online a while ago. He was wearing a visor, but he's not playing. So that's at least all we know right now is that Ryan O'Reilly is not playing tonight.
Okay, so Nashville. I'll get to O'Reilly in a quick second, but to just preface all of this, some teams had circled back on Steven Stamkos in the last couple of days. I don't see that being realistic at this point. They obviously moved Bunting today. They moved Blankenberg yesterday, Colorado. Bunting goes to Dallas today. They've been talking to a number of teams about Eric Howler. So that's ongoing. They've been talking to a few teams about Jonathan Marchessault. And Marchessault has, and we've mentioned this last week, and I think the week before, Marchessault is open to going to a legitimate contender. He's got, I think, 3 or 4 years left on that contract. It's a full no move. He'll have to approve, but he is willing to go to a legit contender. And I think those talks have picked up in the last couple of days. Again, because we've talked about it the last few weeks. O'Reilly, there are a lot of teams that like him. And every indication that he's been giving everybody is that he doesn't want to leave Nashville. So I've got to imagine it has to be the perfect scenario for Ryan O'Reilly to waive, or to not even waive, to give his blessing, because he contractually doesn't have a no trade clause or no movement clause. But I've got to imagine it's got to be the perfect fit for him in order for him to say, okay, I'm willing to do this. And now that Colorado made an ad, and Dallas probably is not in that mix. Is it Minnie? Is it a backup for Carolina? Is it Montreal? I'm not sure, to be honest.
Okay, but let me ask you:
if he's signing off, it's got to be the perfect spotter.
But
that's what he's been saying.
So they're treating him as if he's got a full no move, right? It's where you want to go. So what's the fit? Like, you run it back and you go to Colorado? You try there? You've been there before. I mean, he's been in a lot of places in the National Hockey League, but a player like Ryan O'Reilly can definitely help any team. Like, let's put that here and all that there. And he's a guy that play obviously up and down lineup without question. He's a guy that you want in your lineup come crunch time. He's a guy that you want in your lineup come, finals and getting there and doing things like that. But the interesting one was all season it seemed as though that there wasn't going to be a move, that he didn't want to go anywhere, that this was a place that he was going to remain, and that was in Nashville. Now it comes out that they're looking for a new home for Jonathan Marchessault. Steven Stamkos, I can't see it happening. I can't see him waving and moving. But Ryan O'Reilly is the interesting one for me. So do you think, like, if he's held out a lineup, I mean, obviously you mentioned the injury, that has to signal that there's something on the horizon, that they've got something from someone where they've already almost maybe talked to him and said, listen, this is what we have. This is what you wanted. Are you going to do it?
Yeah. And sometimes, like yesterday, the Leafs held out their 3 guys and they're still Leafs right now. Yep. It doesn't mean necessarily that something is imminent in this hour, but it means that these teams have options and they feel they can swing on one of these options in order to make a deal happen. Like Luke Schenn, for example. Like Luke Schenn, we talked about. He's out. The update I got is there's nothing close on Schenn, but there are options. So nothing close and nothing imminent means they're not ready to sign off just yet. They're still making decisions and still want to see if they can, maximize a return. If that's the case with O'Reilly, again, it's got to be the spot that he wants to go to. And Colorado still has cap space. They still have enough to accommodate that contract. I don't know if they'd pull it off.
Yeah.
And how much more friggin' ammunition can you have? I guess as much as you need. But that would be interesting if they could finagle that one. But for him to not be in the lineup tonight is, that's interesting to me. And I'm looking at the game sheet right now because I'm just checking the game sheet. They have him. They also have Bunting, so they got to update that.
Bunting no longer plays for them.
So he is scratched. He's not playing for them tonight. But yeah, we'll see kind of where that goes. I'm also going to check some of the other ones. So,
all right. Well, I'll take care of some housekeeping while you do that. You see that trade ticker that is below, that's running there. That's our trade ticker. Brought to you by Puckpedia. So you're going to see trades come up there, different things throughout the show, obviously here as we do this show and into tomorrow in our deadline show. So make sure you keep an eye on that. And obviously it's the most exciting days of the year will be the trade deadline show. Teams setting up their rosters for a playoff push, freezing up cap space, adding future assets. Join the DFO crew tomorrow. Dave will be there. I'll be there. Cart Hutton will be there. There'll be a lot of people there. Jeff Merrick is hosting it. It's going to be fun. 11 a.m. Eastern. For the daily Faceoff trade special. Also, if you're watching, make sure to like and subscribe. We do this for you. We're a people show. We like to do it for you. You ask questions, we try and answer them. Chat's been hopping. Thank you to everybody in the chat that has been asking different questions. Autumn Voyage, is LA buying or selling? We'll get to that maybe in a little bit. Thank you very much for your contributions. Ryan says, what are the odds of Edmonton getting a different goalie? Odds might be a little low there, Ryan. Sorry. Nabil, can you talk about Ristolainen and if he gets moved? Dave, that's the interesting one to me before we wrap this thing up. We'll go another 10 minutes or so, and then we wrap it up here a bit, let you get out and get some rest before tomorrow. But
if there are questions in the chat, feel free. Throw those in there.
Yeah, absolutely. Ristolainen, what's the latest there? We haven't even talked about him.
Yeah, no, there's still a lot of interest. It was a little bit quiet in the middle of the day, and then towards the evening hour, East Coast time, things started to pick up a little bit on that front. The expectation, though, even at that point, this evening, East Coast time, was that this is something that's going to get done tomorrow, or expected to. If it gets to the finish line, it's not happening tonight. It's going to happen tomorrow. Now, that doesn't mean a team is not going to just say, what the hell with this. We want to make this happen now. Let's here's the deal. Let's go. But again, the expectation, according to two people I've talked to very close to the situation in the Flyers, is that this might get dragged into tomorrow as opposed to happening tonight. But there are multiple teams in the mix on Ristolainen, and it goes back to the ones that I kind of mentioned before. So Detroit, Boston in the mix. I know Tampa has explored before. I know Montreal has explored before. Utah did before getting Uyghur. And there are a couple other teams that I'm trying to remember off the top of my head, and I will try to figure that out because I still haven't figured out who that Tampa kid is that is also out there in play outside of Sam O'Reilly. And I forgot to look that up. But that's kind of the update on Ristolainen. Talks are ongoing. Philly's got a few other irons in the fire, too. There's Nick Delorier. There's Bobby Brink. And I think a couple other pieces that are being discussed out of Philly.
Couple questions about the New York Islanders and maybe Jordan Kyrou. I think the Islanders, if they're in on Connor Garland, which there were some questions about it the other day, and reports suggesting that they might be in on him, and then they weren't in on him. So who knows? It's circle back season. Remember that. My two favorite words when talking about things. But Connor Garland and Jordan Kyrou and the New York Islanders.
Yeah. Yes. So they've gone back and forth a number of times. They've circled back a bunch. They've whatever other term you want to use. All that to say that, yes, the Islanders have spoken to the Blues about Jordan Kyrou. They've also spoken to the Blues about Robert Thomas. I believe there was a discussion about both. I don't know how long that went, but I don't think it went too long. But the shift was not necessarily Thomas; it was Kyrou. I think the asking price is just too much. I think St. Louis wants Aitchison as part of a deal, and I don't believe the Islanders have any interest in moving him. They like the future potential of Schaefer, Aitchison together, that combo. So I would be very shocked if they move off of him. So with that to say, I'm not anticipating a Kyrou move to the Islanders at this exact hour. Can stuff change, blah, blah, blah. Sure. Yes, of course. But I'd be a little bit surprised if that were the case. As I mentioned earlier, we talked about this earlier in the show when Hutz was on. The Islanders, the update I got at the time in this last hour, the Islanders, Devils, and Bruins are in the race for Connor Garland. So the Islanders are part of that mix at the moment, and we'll see what happens there. We know that they've tried to trade Anthony Duclair once before. He's got a full no trade. I believe he exercised that right at the time earlier on this season. Within the last month, I believe it kind of quieted down up until this week. So he's been scratched. That's primarily the reason. We'll see if it does anything, if he changes his mind, and if there's another fit somewhere else. I have no idea if he's part of these Kyrou or Garland discussions. I'd be a little bit surprised, but that's another kind of name to look out for. But Garland right now, along with, in addition to the Isles, along with the Bruins and Devils, seem to be the three teams in the race currently for them. There were others. There were other teams. I think Columbus. I mentioned Washington, San Jose. So it seems like, again, it's now the Isles, the Devils, and the Bruins there.
Oilers Nation asked, "Hello, Dave. It's Liam. Are the Oilers acquiring AJ Greer?"
Hi, Liam. I'm surprised you didn't ask me about a goalie. Well, I mean, Greer fits the bottom six kind of vibe that they've been looking to improve on. That being said, again, they added Doc, they added Dickinson. Presumably Dickinson's the 3C. I don't know how things looked. I don't even know if they were at practice today, to be honest. It's been that busy of a day for me. But AJ Greer makes, I'm pretty sure, $775,000 or something like that, under $1 million. Might be pretty sure that's the case. We can verify that at some point.
Right now.
Or you can just yell at me in the chat if I'm wrong. But either way, it's a very attractive cap hit for a guy that has that experience, has a cup ring, and is not afraid to get dirty. Also, I don't know how many friends he has, Liam, on the Islanders.
Makes $850.
On the Oilers. Okay, 850. All right, so under $1 million. It's still pretty attractive, but um, I think there need to be a little mending of relationships there between the Oilers and AJ Greer if it ends up being that destination.
I mean, it's not like they're getting Matthew Tkachuk. It's a little bit different, but you're right.
No,
I mean,
AJ
look,
Greer is not overly.
I get it.
Yeah,
I get it. But look, I mean, hey, he can help you win a cup. A guy that's been there before.
yeah.
By all means, if I'm Stan Bowman to try and improve my team in any way. Okay, just a couple more questions, Dave. Everyone in the chat is loving the show, obviously, and wanting to get your take on lots of different things. Let's start with the San Jose Sharks. They trade for Kiefer Sherwood. They extend Kiefer Sherwood. Good for Kiefer Sherwood. Absolutely. Go get your bag. That is a wonderful contract for him. Yeah. Sets up his family for generations. Very well deserved. What is Mike Greer got his finger on right now?
So a few things. If they could add another top 6 caliber player, they'd like to do it. So they're combing the market for that, but they're not a rental type of team. Like they want to bring in somebody. If he's going to be substantial, he's got term. So they're still looking at that. We're also looking at that. They're also looking to augment the blue line. And they're willing to listen on Ferrero and Liljegren and Klingberg and Desharnais and Leddy. They're all on expiring deals. I haven't heard too much traction coming into today, excuse me. And then all of today, I haven't really checked in on the defensive situation with San Jose outside of they want to add on that blue line.
Yeah,
we know they have interest in Braden Schneider from the Rangers. So they're looking at that caliber player who's young, controllable. He's an RFA. They can extend him. He can be part of that group for a while. They're also looking at veteran defensemen with term. And that's where a guy like Morgan Riley might kick in because he's got a number of years left on his deal. And even at his age, they're still looking for that veteran presence on that blue line. They only have Dmitry Orlov signed next season and Dickinson. And then Mukamadula is an RFA, I believe. So they got a lot of holes on that back end going into next season. Yes, the focal point is now, but it doesn't mean that you can't pay attention to what's happening after. So top 6 winger with term is definitely or forward, I should say, on the radar for the Sharks, and also just kind of shifting that blue line a little bit. They want to add, and they've got pieces they're willing to move. We'll see kind of where that goes in the team now. So we'll see if somebody else kind of steps up in that regard.
Final question, and this has nothing to do with the on-the-ice stuff, Dave. So it's from Yashra. David, Are you in a group chat with other NHL GMs? Do GMs tell you or other insiders directly if there is a trade? How do insiders get their info? I would love to be you if you were in a group chat with other NHL GMs.
I would love to be in a group chat with other GMs. No, definitely no GM group chats. That would be dangerous, and
most of them are still on sending emails right now.
Yeah,
GMs.
The text chain has shifted a little bit. The mass messaging on the emails for some reason is still a thing, but yeah, get a good WhatsApp chat and get everybody going on that. It's a lot of communicate. Like I'm on my phone. I'm not just playing Brick Breaker. I don't even know if that's still a thing. Whatever. I'm not. I don't know. Whatever.
We're done. We're almost done now. Thank God.
Yeah, that's been a long day. Tomorrow's will be longer. But I'm not just screwing around on this thing. You talk to everybody. You try to. So you're talking to GMs. You're talking to other management people. You're talking to scouts. You're talking to players. You're talking to agents. People around these guys. Other people in the room. Other people. On teams. You're talking to as many people as you can. You have to be a people person. At the same time, you also have to be able to decipher what information you're getting and then try to confirm it with others. Or like someone will give you a piece of a puzzle and you've got to find the rest of those pieces to form what this picture is going to look like.
Yeah.
And it's just constantly trying to get those updates. And, as things are progressing, it's on the player side, it's on the team side. Like today, just on this show, just trying to get updates on not the update I wanted. Trying to get updates on just some of the stuff going on out there. And with all these guys sitting, what's going on? You got something close? Is something happening? Is like all that. So you get those types of information, but you're talking to as many people as you possibly can. And then at the same time, just making sure you've got the right info. I've been burned a couple of times. I thought I had the right thing, just full transparency. Thought I had the right name or the right player in a deal. Turned out, he wasn't in the final package. He was talked about, but he wasn't in that final package. So, and you also have to tread because you don't want to screw these guys' lives over. This is a very intense and stressful time for everybody in the National Hockey League, for all the players. So you try to minimize that damage as best you can, and you go from there. But again, it's constantly communicating with a bunch of teams. It's constantly communicating with agents, with player reps, and so on and so on. There's not just one direction where you get information from, because you've got to be able to siphon that info out and then confirm it with the right people. If a player messages me and says, I just got traded, okay, that's a pretty good source right there.
Yeah.
So you run with that. But if someone messages me and says, hey, keep an eye on so-and-so, then all right, then that's a nice tip. And then you try to confirm it from there and kind of go from there. Like the Uyghur deal yesterday, that coming out, when's he ready to accept it? What's involved? Is, you hear from one piece that, it's the prospect is involved, in that, all right, can you try to reach his rep? Can you try to reach the GM or somebody? Can you confirm it? You get the info and then you put it out. Doesn't always happen at the snap of the finger. Sometimes it's a bit of a process too.
All right, Dave. Well, you're the best. When people give me info, which happens so often, I usually just give it to you, or kind of just, you're one of those people.
You try to find, let's put those pieces.
I don't claim, I'm not
together.
claiming to be an insider. You know what I mean? I just know things that happen sometimes on the inside, and I bring it on the outside and give it to you, and you go back on the inside and try and figure it out. Anyways, this has been a long show. So
half the time I get yelled at, but
a lot of the time,
always.
But that happens. I mean, look, that happens to everybody. I think you go every day trying to strive and do better, and this is what we do. And obviously, a lot of people have watched this show today, so we thank you for that immensely and tremendously. If you liked it, give us a like. David, we will see you tomorrow, bright and early, for the Daily Faceoff trade special. Looking forward to it. Starts at 11 a.m. Eastern, 8 o'clock Pacific time, here on the Daily Faceoff YouTube channel, also on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, wherever you can find us, we will be. David, thank you so much. Really appreciate you taking the time out of your day to do this. I know it's busy as hell, and we will talk to you on the other side.
Can't wait. It's going to be fun tomorrow.
Hey, hockey fans, if you enjoyed that video, then make sure you hit the subscribe button right here on the Daily Faceoff YouTube. We have you covered for everything you need. Exclusive interviews on The Sheet with Jeff Merrick, all the latest hockey news on Daily Faceoff Live, and you can always get your morning started with Johnny Lazarus and Colby Cohn on Morning Cup of Hockey. Don't miss a minute. Hit that subscribe button.